Hi everyone, I'm Lisa from Down to Earth Gardening and Design. Welcome to today's video, which is on raised beds and how to use raised beds in your flower garden. So it's a little bit of a design video and it's a little bit of a raised bed video, so we're combining them both. So I want to show you what I'm doing in my front garden here, which is just a couple years old. It's slowly evolving. It's a big space, and I think these make a really great addition to this garden here. So I want to talk about some tips on putting raised beds in your gardens, and I'm going to walk you through what I did here and the whys and the how-tos. So first of all, I want to say that when you have a large garden, or actually a garden of any size for that matter, it's really nice design-wise. It makes it a little more interesting if you can divvy that garden up into what I call rooms. So different areas that may have a different theme. You can use different colors, you can use different elements, but just divide it up to make it a little interesting and kind of section it off. And this is really helpful, especially when you have a large garden, because straight up flowers, although they're beautiful, it's just not as interesting unless you have something going on, something a little bit different everywhere. So essentially what I'm doing today with my raised beds is I'm kind of quartering off some sections of this garden to really elevate the interest out here. And I do this often with large garden spaces, and it's pretty common to do this easily with a walkway, by using an informal garden path, by putting in a seating area like you can see behind me here. But I think what we don't think about when we think about dividing our garden into garden rooms is we don't think about using raised beds. And so I wanted to talk more about it today and show you how beautiful and what an interesting addition it really can be. And it's going to help me out too with my plantings. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So when you have raised beds, they're great because the soil heats up quicker and it stays warmer longer. So that's important for me because I live in Connecticut and the winters get pretty cold here. So I want to have as long of a garden season as possible. So that is helpful not just for vegetables, which raised beds are great for vegetables, and that's one of the reasons, but also for flowers. Why not enjoy your flowers a little bit longer? But number two, the practicality of having raised beds is that you can also control the soil quality. So I'm going to fill this with some really great topsoil compost mix. I live in Connecticut, like I said, and it's pretty rocky. You can see a lot of rocks here. So the fact that this is going to be some nice screened topsoil and compost is cause for celebration actually for me. So the raised beds, they're serving a couple of purposes here, and one is of course the design purpose, but also functionality. They're going to be so great when I start digging in the dirt here. So how do you incorporate raised beds into your flower garden? So you want to think about a few things. So number one, you want to think about what you're planting in them. So for me, I like versatility. So I like the idea of having these to maybe mix up every year, do something a little bit different. So that's really going to make the garden interesting if these 3 beds here have something different every year. It's kind of just that element of surprise. So you do want to think about what you're going to plant in them because that's going to help you figure out the size and meaning the depth, because you're thinking about the root growth of whatever you're planting. But it's also going to maybe help you think about the material that you're using. So I am going to talk some more about that in a bit. Number two, you want to think about placement. So we've thought about what we might want to plant in these, and for me, I know I want to plant things that will require some full sun. So I'm going to place these in the yard where they're going to get some really great full sun. That's going to give me flexibility for flowers or vegetables. So remember, cottage garden, which I'm a huge fan of, there's vegetables and fruits in a cottage garden. So that's a possibility. So I love that flexibility of a cottage garden. So you may see some vegetables or even some berries in these at some point. So number 3, you want to be thinking about the size of your raised bed. So I like to have my raised beds no wider than 4 feet. So these here are 4 by 4. The reason for that is you can reasonably reach in about 2 feet. You want to always be able to get to the center of those beds. So they could be 6 feet long, 8 feet long, 10 feet long. You have as much flexibility as you want there. But as far as width, 4 foot is a good rule of thumb. So also, we talked a little bit about what we're planting in them. Now, I might want to plant root vegetables. I might want to plant some dahlias. So I want to have a nice tall bed. So these here are a foot tall, which I really love. Now, not just for practicality, but also I really like the statement they make being a little taller. You don't typically see raised beds that are taller than 6 to 8 inches. And so I really wanted to have a pop out here so they really stood out. So lastly, you want to talk about material. So what I've used for material here is COR-ten steel. So when you're thinking about material, it's twofold. So one, you're thinking about design, what you want it to look like. Now I love cedar raised beds, and I have a couple in the back here. However, they're a little more maintenance and they're a little more rustic. So this house here is a raised ranch. It's on its side here, so our kitchen and everything is upstairs. It's a little modern. I've got some cable railings here and some different modern elements, but I do also really love rustic. So I feel like the COR-ten steel really is a combination of both of those. You can see another example of some modern things that I'm trying to incorporate into the garden, and that's the Adirondack chairs back here. They're a more modern style. So also you want to be thinking about, when you're thinking about material, maintenance. So the cedar beds are great, but really if you want them to last a little longer, you should seal them. Otherwise they do have a lifespan. You can also use masonry. You can have any kind of stone raised beds, a little pricier. However, the COR-ten steel, pretty reasonably priced. And as far as maintenance, they're super low, actually no maintenance. So they will rust. Essentially what they are some raw steel. It's edging, actually, came in a kit. I have a little bit of video clip on how we put it together. But once they rust, they really are forming a protective coating. And so they will never have to be treated. I think the key with the COR-ten steel is you really have to like the look of them, because they do come gray, but then they do naturally rust over time. So I do really like the look of that. I don't mind it at all. And I also have to say, another bonus of it is that it is a food safe material. So that's pretty great. So as far as placement, I do want to talk a little more about that, because once you build something like these and put them in place and fill them, you're probably not going to move them. So really think about location and also think about spacing. So you'll notice that I have these 3 beds set on a diamond here, facing east. So they're perfectly square beds, but to make it a little more interesting, we have them, I guess, shaped in a diamond here. But you also want to have at least 3 feet in between them, because 3 feet is a good walking path. That's a standard walking path, but it also is wide enough for your wheelbarrow or any tools. It's a great workspace. So you might even want to measure your wheelbarrow because you might want to get in and out of here, you know, with compost, mulch, any kind of supplies. So these here are spaced out a little bit more. I'm going to tell you a funny story about why in a minute. They're at about 44 to 46 inches apart here. So my funny story is, we live in New England. It is rocky here. In order for me to see the layout of this, I like to put down some stakes and map it out, look at it for a little bit. You could also use cardboard, look at your design, space it out. And that's all well and good, but when it comes to working in real time, doesn't always work out that way. And that's because these come with about 2-foot stakes, and that's what anchors each corner. So it's literally edging that's a foot tall that we ordered. And the stakes hit rocks exactly where I wanted my beds. So we had to modify the stakes a little bit by cutting them, and we also had to modify where I had them. So I really just kind of wanted them parallel here. It's kind of cool. I'm going to give you a shot of what we see when we're up on the upper deck, and that's where the kitchen is, and that's where we do all of our dining or coffee or happy hour up there. And it's so cool to look down and see these shapes. So I love how it's working out. The front yard here, the gardens are also on a slope, so you can see them pretty well from down below. So it's really just going to be a fun way to make this gardening a little more interesting and divvy it up into my outdoor garden rooms. So stay tuned for more on how we're going to fill these, what we're going to be doing with them this year. And then I have some other projects going on that you might want to check out. So if you like this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for some more gardening.